So, chapter 14, the first section, the author says that, she tried to not go by any labels whatsoever, but it was kind of hard because she still did believe in a lot of things. And it was just much more efficient to let people know that she was vegan and other things as well. So, and I think the main thing was that she heard a saying that the more labels you have for yourself, the dumber you are. And I think that's because the more labels you have for yourself, the more you're restricted, to your own thinking. So, she found that it's kind of unavoidable in the long run to completely go without any labels. That's what it really looks like. So instead of having labels, she kind of reconciled with herself. And the second part is about holding your identity lightly. And it's basically saying that, yes, you mostly believe in the views of, perhaps for me, it'd be like being Catholic or being Republican, but it's contingent, which means that it's dependent on the fact that, well, does this make sense? Does this work to my own personal favor or interests? Um, that sounds very selfish, right? But I think everybody has personal interests, right? Um, so it's contingent on that. Or perhaps if you wanted it to be in a broader spectrum, because personal interest actually does kind of negate a lot of these things. Why are we doing this in the first place? Um, I believe that your view should also be, or for me at least, contingent on the truth, what the evidence really shows, and what that means. So that's what I think, for me, that's my stance on it. To hold your identity lightly and to be able to shift back and forth. Again, for me, having a duality, being able to be homeless and also living in a family that were millionaires, like that helps, because you experience both sides so you can switch back. I've also been chubby and I've also been very fit. So I know both of, I know that as well. I know the mentality of each identity, and I think it's really important. I was atheist for a bit, very atheist, and that was also something that I had a duality with, so it's very interesting, but it's good because it really opens you up. So this next section here is I'm Not a Me Too Republican, and it's talking about Barry Goldwater, who was involved with the Richard Nixon case of, what is it called? Sorry. Yep, it was Watergate. Okay, so Watergate. So he was involved in that, and he was also involved in the 80s with Ronald Reagan, And what's interesting about it is that this conservative, Barry Goldwater, yeah, he was Republican, and yeah, he held Republican views, but he was also, he thought that, gay people should have a right to, love who they're loving. Love the other sex, the same sex. And, he was actually really open. And with Bill Clinton, he kind of didn't like Bill Clinton. But when Bill Clinton was investigated for something, he had proper judgment. And he was like, you know what? No, I don't think there's anything wrong with this scandal. And he's talking about what was called Whitegate. Let's see, Whitewater accusations. So this isn't the Monica Lewinsky one, but Whitewater. So, anyways, yep, that's that. Okay, and looking over some information, the Whitewater accusation was being charged of serious crimes that dealt with real estate. So that's what it was all about. So, anyways, though, I think the main point here is that even though he was a Republican, he wanted to be fair, you know, and he wasn't just like every other Republican. He actually had an open mind, and that's a great idea. This is very useful information. So, could you pass an ideological Turing test? Basically, it's this idea. If you were to act as the opposite party, would you be able to voice their concerns as they would? So, Turing test is basically, can you distinguish AI from a human being? Like, it's designed so that if AI can pass this test, they sound like they're human and they're convincing. Ideological Turing test is, could you pass if you were, the enemy, if you weren't on the enemy's side, and you actually, were to say, I understand you, this is exactly how you feel. So that's what I think is really interesting. I think that I had to do this many times in order to come to an understanding with my wife. Because my wife, main thing about her was that she was like, okay, like this is what I believe. And then I'd really have to step out of my shoes and be like, okay, so let me try to put myself in your shoes and let me try to tell you how I think you feel. And then I would go into it. And I would start feeling emotional when that would happen. And usually when I would get to that point, I was like, gosh, actually I do understand her now because I feel emotional about it. I feel like this is a strong point and I'm actually taking on this side. I'm actually fighting for the other side because I'm trying to understand the other side. And I think that's a lot of people, they don't like doing this because if they try to do it, they're still going to sound like somebody who sounds like, what did she say? It sounds like someone who hates that idea and, they can't help but sound like it, even though they're pretending. So basically they sound like they're pretending. They sound like a Republican hater, even though they're trying to sound like a Republican, right? Or something like that. So it's like you can't hide your own feelings. You can't hide your true self in a way. So that's interesting. And also this idea of caricatures is like when you hear somebody like take on the other role, they start being sarcastic about it, or they start sounding like a campy cartoon villain because they don't really believe in it, and they're just being like, oh yes, oh, and oh, women's rights, oh gosh, like women, they don't deserve rights because men are clearly superior. I mean, it's kind of like this, you're looking down at the idea as you kind of portray it as if it were some sort of like unrealistic hyper reality that that you're kind of making fun of as you say it, because you don't really believe it. You're not here to endorse it. You're there to expose it for how stupid it is, right? So that's the idea. Super useful. And I know that this is kind of like, people do this all the time. Very much so. Very true. So next section, a strongly held identity prevents you from persuading others. Yeah, when you say something and it makes you feel really good about your point and your reason, then you don't really convince other people at all. It's hard to. And I remember when I was in Boy Scouts, I was bunking with somebody who was like completely pro-science, like complete atheist, and we were bunking together, and then, we were talking about philosophy, and he asked me why I was Catholic, and then he's like, do you really believe all those things that they teach you? And I was like, I mean, it might be wrong, but how do you know what you're saying is not wrong also? And he's like, what? What do you mean? He's like, well, how do you know that all the things that you've been told are actually true? How do you know that they're not fabricated, because isn't that, if I'm to say that, to admit, yeah, maybe all the things in the Bible are fabricated, all the things that have been taught are fabricated, wouldn't that also go the other way? And you could say, all the things that you've been taught can also be a fabrication. Everything that you've listened to, everything that's been created, how do you know that it's not just a smokescreen? And then he said, well, it's because I saw, the evolution of, or I saw like this, I saw that. And I said, you saw it, but how do you know it's not fake? How, like, you saw it, but how do you really know it's not fake? I mean, I can say the same thing with my religion. Maybe it is fake, but are you able to do it? Are you able to drop that as well? You know, and that conversation, really, he was rolling around all night, and I was just like laying down there silent. But it really made him think, because it's like, how do you know your truth is any more superior than mine? How do you know it's not fabricated? Oh, because there's a lot of people who are in it. Same thing with religion. You know, there's all these scientists, and you might be like, oh, you're being a heretic if you think, are you saying that science is not true? All these things that, we've read wavelengths, and we've been able to look at the stars, and we are able to calculate all these things. We have scientific proof. And I say, yeah, no, you guys, there might be credence to that. I mean, obviously it's something that we know of, but you're questioning a belief, and you're questioning, like, how well does it stand up when you just ask in general, like, despite all the things that have been crafted, all the things that have been created in its favor, how do you know that you're not being lied to? How do you know? Do you really know? How, like, really, do you? Because in a way, even to believe in science is to believe in faith. You're still believing someone who's telling you information. You're taking for granted all these things that are being told to you, all this information, this math, all the calculus. You can dig as much as you want, and you can, look it up as much as you want. But in the end, it's still hearsay, right? I mean, just think of it like this. You can say science shows that the world is this many years old. It's like billions of years old, let's say. It's like, okay, cool. So what's your proof? It's like, oh, well, they went to the laboratory, and they actually, the science proves this. Have you been to the laboratory? No, but, it's been shown on, YouTube, so I know it exists. Okay. And, like, well, what else is your proof? It's like, oh, because geometrically they can calculate, how old rocks are, because, geologists can put it in a machine, and you can tell, like, this is how long something is. So it's true. Okay. Geologist. Okay. Are you a geologist? Are you a geologist? And again, geology and the people who are studying it, I'm not saying it's false. I'm not saying it is false. But to what is your certainty that what you're hearing is actually true? Like, can you really say that? Let's say that your whole life was a lie, and everybody was acting around, and everybody said this and said that and said this and said that, and they came up with elaborate ways of saying, well, it's proof because of this and that. Would you be able to really tell if you were living in a script, or if you were genuinely alive right now? You couldn't tell. You wouldn't be able to tell. So in that case, your arguments are just as, straw men. It's just a straw man argument just as much as mine would be. If I were to talk about religion and talk about why religion is real, why I believe in what I believe, why all this and all that, we're kind of on the same grounds, taking emotion out of it. right? It's just so fascinating to me. How sure are you? Are you really, 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 really sure? Are you sure nobody's lying to you? Are you sure you're not just being told something that's so that you can be a certain way, so that you can serve certain people, so you can be, uh, be a pawn in maybe a bigger agenda of someone else? Of course, I've pondered all these things, with religion and stuff like that. But have you ever pondered that when it comes to science? Anyways, though, um, that's the idea with that. So, interesting. Okay, next. So, the next part here, understanding the other side makes it possible to change minds. So, it's talking about a doctor, or sorry, not a doctor. I believe it. Let's see, double check. He's a journalist. So, it's a journalist who believed that vaccines were completely safe, and then he met a lady who ended up being his wife. You know, she was actually anti-vaccine, and then he already understood her and and respected her for her intelligence. So they had a obviously he learned, oh, okay, I guess there are some reasons why people would be skeptical, and actually trusting the medical community is actually kind of like being blind in a way. So he thought they were blind, but in a way he realized he was the one who was blind. And that's what's interesting about this whole idea. When you claim you know something and you claim that what you're doing is right, it ends your education of that topic because you believe you're right already. So why would you look into it anymore, right? So, anyways, the idea here that happens is that he realizes there's a vaccine called Pandemrix, and it actually did cause autism to people, or sorry, trigger narcolepsy in children. And it was pretty evident that, yeah, no, this vaccine was not good, and it was really bad for people. So, because of that, he was like, okay, well, I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to actually concede, and then he realizes, yeah, yeah, he could be wrong. And I think when you have to first be able to admit that you may be wrong, and that's a great way to start getting on grounds with certain people. That's when people can start trusting you more because they know you're being honest. You know, they know you can be honest. So what's interesting is that there's all these different things that happen. So anyhow, that's that. Let's move on to the next part. So what's interesting is that, next section is holding your identity lightly compatible with activism. It's really all about, the idea of, like, shouldn't you be a soldier if you want to be, to get into activism, because you need that motivation and you need that determination to move mountains and to really go and I guess you can say, like, do what you need to do, kind of thing. And if you're nuanced and you're kind of fair-minded, then you'll be slower or whatever, and you will be less effective. Well, honestly, it goes to the whole idea of the fact that you can't really persuade people if you're a soldier. If you're a soldier going with another soldier, going at it with another soldier, then it's ineffective and it could be negative. Butting heads with each other, it's inefficient, right? There's a lot of energy that's used and not a lot of leeway, happens. It's like doing a football blitz. Yeah, you push everything forward, power versus power, but the blitz, you can only gain maybe like 5 yards, 10 yards maximum, with a really good blitz or whatnot. Rarely do you get all the way through. So blitzing, emotional blitzing, is not really as effective. But what is also interesting is that sometimes these activists, they fight with other activists of their same tribe because they want to show superiority, so they fight over the little things, little differences. You see this with religion a lot. What differentiates, you know, all these different churches. They're all these little different things. They all believe in the same God, but they're all fighting with each other, And it's quite a sight, actually, when you think about it. They're trying to prove that they're superior to the other. In the end, you know, if you want to be the most effective, you should be able to, I feel like, you should be able to have persuasive power. And when you have too much of a soldier mindset, you might be able to persuade people through bullheadedness or just your consistency, or they just get tired of it and they fall. But again, if somebody's expecting you to run at them head on, you're not going to really make a lot of leeway. So that's that. Spencer Cox is a hero. So next section, the citizen, scientist, and the AIDS crisis. So these people who, got AIDS, they wanted to be activists, but none of them were really scientists, And in the beginning, they were kind of doing a lot of silly things, like they tried to, just like protests, but kind of extreme protests. Things like toilet papering somebody's house, but more extreme than that. Stuff like that. So what's interesting about it is that they actually they wanted to understand what was really going on, the inside work. They studied science, they studied the government, they studied how government policies worked out, all of these things. And then because they understood all of these things, they were able to create kind of like a very intelligent kind of test for getting the vaccine out and making sure that it was good. And Spencer Cox, one of these people, he discovered something called, a large simple trial. And it's something that he discovered when he was teaching himself study design. Okay. So he used that, and the results were announced in January 1996. And yeah, it was significant. Like this vaccine, this drug, whatever it was, it did prevent people from dying, and there were large. It's not a placebo effect. It actually AIDS plummeted by 60%. So it wasn't completely over, but it helped. And their activism, because they were fueled intelligently, it actually, it got a lot done. And it happened. It happened quickly. Results happened quickly. That's great. All right, in the end, this idea of, holding your identity lightly, it's always for your own good, is basically what the book says. It's always for your own good, and it's always for, your benefit, whether it's conceding or not, being able to hold your identity lightly helps you so that you can discover truth more quickly, and probably also help others discover truth more quickly as well. So I think that's what's most important. That's extremely important. And what I believe, because I'm saying I believe, like, this is my identity, right? I'm catching on. Yeah, I'll continue with it, though. I believe that in the end, when you know the truth, when you know what's really going on, when you could admit that maybe everything that I've been fed is a lie, you start there. Assume that everything you've been fed is a lie, and then work backwards. Work from that point, And that way, when lies are revealed, one, you're not completely, overtaken by it. Um, Even our own lives, this reality that we live in, it could be a lie. It could be a simulation. Everything that we have, that we believe, can be a lie, and that's making peace with that allows you to make peace with whatever reality we are in, what it provides. So, anyways, though, I think it's interesting. I think it's very, very interesting. Um, and it allows you to jump back and forth between different sides and see other people's reality, see what they believe is true, and it helps you to get along with them better. I think it helps you even push your point and persuade people more. In a weird way, even this book is kind of like a business book. It's almost selling something, and it's not selling anything of money, although you do have to pay money for it, which is totally fine with me. But it's selling an idea. The money itself is to get the book because you believe that the book's going to be of quality. But then there's also the idea itself. Selling the idea that Scout Mindset really is the best way to learn, and this is what it entails, and this is why. I wonder if two people who are truly, who truly have Scout Mindset are able to debate on really gnarly things, that the other doesn't really believe in, and still come out with, a deeper understanding, or maybe, some idea of the truth, what works and what's really effective. And I think it's through collaboration like that, or being able to team up with people who you don't usually team up with. That's what causes the greatest growth, because you're actually you have, it's almost like what a vaccine does, right? Like when you get a vaccine, you become immune to the virus, right? I feel like that's what happens when you're able to team up with people who are different than you. So for me, I'm Filipino, but like I know a lot of people who are completely different races from me that I have befriended, and really, really enjoy their company and being with them. Same thing with people I've known people who are really rich. I've known people who are not really rich. I know people in the middle. I know people who have gotten, high accolades, in terms of their scholastic accomplishments. I know people who haven't, who are the complete opposite. And I think that, in order to really bring people together, or really for even humanity itself to team up to make things better, I think it's essential, it's quintessential to be able to go both sides. And right now I sound very scholarly, but yeah, no, people would be surprised that I have a punk side to me, thug side of me, that's very different. I talk very different. So, yo, homie. Anyway, you guys have a good one. Have a good one. Have a great day. Until next time, take care.